Nom Nom delivers fresh food with whole ingredients backed by veterinarian science. Science tells us that a dog's health starts in the bowl, so improving their diet is one of the best ways to help them live a long and happy life. Nom Nom's food is full of proteins your dog loves and the vitamins and nutrients they need to thrive. All you have to do is order, pour, and serve. Ready to make the switch to fresh? Order Nom Nom today. Go to https://trynom.com/curveball and get 50% off your first order plus free shipping. That's https://trynom.com/curveball. Plus, Nom Nom comes with a money-back guarantee. If your dog's tail isn't wagging within 30 days, Nom Nom will refund your first order. No fillers, no nonsense, just Nom Nom. Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by Jennifer Gershberg. She is the founder of JG Talks, LLC. She is a professor at the University of Maryland, and the reason she launched JG Talks, LLC is because she noticed that students' skills were plummeting and their anxiety was spiking. So we're going to be talking to her about what she's doing and how she's helping students with our motivational speaking business. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So as you said in the introduction, I was a professor at University of Maryland Smith School of Business. I taught there for the last 8 years, over which time I have had thousands of students, usually approximately 400 each year. So I've sort of seen it all in terms of how undergrads are doing. And I've been concerned really particularly since the pandemic about students' skills and mental health. And, it's not a surprise. It's all over the news as well. This is a really tough time for everyone, and college students are no different. So it got me thinking that I could have sort of more of an impact if I actually resigned from UMD and did motivational talks instead, so I can reach students everywhere. So I do talks across the country now to groups of high school and college students, and I try to teach them the fundamental skills that they will need for academic and professional success and confidence. And I'm loving it.
So you also left your position as a lawyer. So tell the listeners what kind of lawyer you were.
Yeah, so that was sort of in a past life. I am a lawyer, but I practiced for a few years in the early 2000s after I graduated from law school. And I enjoyed law. I did litigation, civil litigation. So I usually represented big defendants when they were sued. And I liked a lot about it. In particular, I enjoyed the research, the writing, the collaboration with clients, with witnesses, with colleagues. But because I did litigation, by definition, litigation is a highly adversarial process. And I didn't love that I spent, like 80% of my time engaged in disputes with opposing counsel on various issues of the day. So I thought that I would teach instead, because teaching sort of incorporated what I most enjoyed about law, the collaboration, the research, the writing, the positive, proactive interactions. But for the most part, it's not adversarial. And as a professor, any dispute I were to get into with a student, I would likely win. So I'm just teasing about that part. But, the adversarial process wasn't for me and for my personality. And I found teaching a really positive way and transferable way to use my law degree. So what I taught was business law. I also taught business ethics at Maryland. So I don't feel at all that my law degree was, unnecessary. I think it's been totally helpful in my career.
Well, how do you feel like college students have changed post-pandemic?
Well, I think students generally are more socially stunted than they used to be. I don't know a better way to put it. I mean, everyone lost so much in the pandemic. And so with the virtual learning, there was so much loss, no matter what grade students were in at the time. It was a crucial developmental stage in their educational journey that was lost. And this is despite best efforts from schools and teachers to sort of do as best they could. There is no question that the pandemic really hurt everyone. So, some people were seniors in high school at the time and are now in college, some were younger. And no matter what grade they were in, they really experienced loss. So the way I've seen it manifest when they're in college is, I think the level of maturity is greatly reduced, the resilience greatly reduced. I think skill-wise, I've noticed some really alarming trends. So I think students have a harder time with time management than they used to, with how to actively study, with how to stick with hard things. And also because there was some social loss throughout the pandemic, I have seen truly some communication challenges and social challenges in students that I hadn't observed to the same degree pre-pandemic.
Well, college is hard to get into. So how do you explain students declining competencies,
Yeah.
due to the hyper competitive admission process?
Well, it's a really good question. And it's something I think about all the time. And it's explainable, I think, because of a few factors. I mean, yes, there's no question college is really hard to get into now. But there's also no mistaking the fact that high schools universally have been inflating grades since the pandemic. They relaxed standards. So part of the reason it's so hard to get into is that lots and lots of students get all A's in high school now. And that's not because they're all Einsteins. The high schools in many senses have practiced significant grade inflation and lowering of academic standards. So that makes it actually harder for the students to get in, because it's hard to differentiate who's really a top student and who is not. So it makes it harder for everyone to get in, because in that sense, it's more competitive. Also, colleges, for other reasons, have gone test optional, which again makes it hard to distinguish among qualified students, because it's one, data point that's sort of out of the equation. So I think there are ways of explaining the difficulty of college admissions, while accepting the fact that college students truly are as ill prepared as they have ever been once they land in college. And I've talked to colleagues from many universities. They're all saying the same thing. It's not a University of Maryland problem. It is a problem across the board. And of that, I'm very confident. And it's a problem in the workplace. I mean, you talk to employers about recent hires. This is sort of a well-known phenomenon, and it's of grave concern.
Well, what advice do you have for students to increase their success in school?
Well, I think it comes down to a few things. I mean, there's advice I give regularly about time management. And, one of the things that I like to do in my talks is give very actionable strategies so that they can leave and actually put what I said into practice and not just think it sounds inspirational, but actually that it will help them. So I teach students how to manage their time, how to set appropriate boundaries around their cell phones, their social media, their group chats, which are terribly distracting when it comes to academics. I teach them specifically how to develop good relationships with professors and why it's so important, how to network and why it's so important, how to study. I mean, students truly come to college and many have no idea how to adequately study for the rigor that is imposed in college. So I teach them how to actively study. And when I say I teach them, I mean, I really get into it. I teach them how to take class notes and what to do with them, what to do with note cards, how to quickly and effectively memorize a lot of information, things that they haven't had to do as much of since the pandemic in high school. And I say to them, the goal is for you to be as confident and well-adjusted as possible as you proceed in your life and throughout school. And the way it's my personal, very strongly held belief that we become confident by building up our competence, because then we know what we're capable of. We know we can do hard things. We know we can rely on ourselves when life gets really hard to deal with adversity, because we have the skills necessary to navigate. And that's always my goal when I talk to students. So those are the types of things I help them with. And of course, it depends on the audience. I mean, my audiences vary tremendously. So, when I talk to student athletes at Division I schools, I talk specifically about the time management issues they're facing and how to study and how to relate to professors well, even when they have to miss class. For high school students, I may talk about different things. For college students, I talk about, networking and resumes and how to build your personal and professional network to be as service-minded and confident as possible. So my messaging changes somewhat depending on the audience. And then, a separate group I like to talk with are parents. So I do a lot of parent talks as well, usually through parents associations at schools. And I talk to them. So these are parents of high schoolers. And I talk to them about the challenges their kids are likely to face when they leave for college and specific ways the parents can help these kids, help position them for success before they leave.
Well, what advice do you have for young adults starting their professional journeys?
Well, I always advise, first of all, students that they should not put too much pressure on themselves to have their path figured out. I mean, life is full of change and full of unexpected events, and you really never know where you're going to end up. And most people don't end up in their first jobs. And so I like students to sort of have that understanding, because it gives them freedom to think and be self-aware and sort of go with the flow. So I always say to them, learn as much as you can and develop as strong relationships as you can in every job you hold. And in every situation you're in, work as hard as possible, gain the trust of others, be service-minded, always ask what you can do to be helpful and confer value on others, because that is what makes you stand out. And that's what makes you recognize your own value and also have other people look to you, which is a powerful position to be in. So that's sort of in a nutshell, much of what I mean, obviously I tell them more, but that's much of my big picture messaging to students as they're starting out in, the real world.
Tell us about any current or upcoming projects that you're working on that people need to know about.
Well, I am really working on individual talks now. So I'm going around to a number of schools, a number of student groups, doing talks. I just came back from Utah where I gave a talk at a university to incoming student athletes. So that was fun. And I am putting together content for a book that I hope to develop. So that is sort of my plan at the moment.
Okay, well, so we can keep up with everything that you're up to, throw out your contact information.
Absolutely. So my Instagram is a great way to sort of get quick free tips. So I definitely recommend that people follow it. The handle is jgtalks.org. So that's JGTALKSORG. My website is jgtalks.org. And I mean, those are really sort of the best ways. And my website has my email and so on. So those are the best ways to reach out.
Close us out with some final thoughts that you might have for the listeners. If there was something I forgot to touch on that you would like to talk about, or just any final thoughts you have.
No, this is great. I mean, the one thing I would say is that, a lot of times when students get to college, they have a really hard time mentally, like mental health wise, because they tend to overestimate their academic prowess for the reason I said before. I mean, high schools really are, not all, but many are grade inflating, and, students have to do really well, and they often end up in college, because it's so hard to get into now, in colleges that they frankly may feel they could have done better than. So they think they can sort of breeze through college and not give 100%. And they're blown away when that turns out not to be the case. So I just want to forewarn students, even if they're straight A students in high school, I think it's very helpful to sort of brush up on some fundamental skills. And these are, they're not substantive academic skills that I teach. It's really about, ways of organizing your life and conceptualizing your work as a job and managing your time appropriately for maximum success. So I think every student honestly could use a little primer before they start college. And college students benefit as well. But as I said, the messaging is often different for current college students. That's more geared toward often the professional skills. And I worked in a business school, so I'm very well versed in those. So that's what I would say.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, jgtalks.org. If you know of any young students, you have young students that are getting ready to get in that professional world or go to college, share this to everybody. Please be sure to follow, rate, and review. If you have any guests or suggestion topics, cjackson102@cox.net is the place to send them. As usual, thank you for listening. And Jennifer, thank you for joining me and sharing your expertise.
Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.